यार क्या just a second just
Guys, I don't know ये क्या हो रहा है. एक तो you have filter on your face. दूसरा please शोर कम करना. Also, by the way, for Zen Sibka, we have a rule that all adjudicators are supposed to keep their cameras on. So ideally, if you could do that, that would be amazing. Okay, prop one, you have the floor.
yeah. All right. Am I visible and audible? Huh. All right. Just a second, I'm setting up my timer. मेरा phone किधर है? मेरा phone किधर है? ये ठीक. Right. Can I start?
You can start, but generally पीछे से ना आवाजें काफी loud आती हैं when they're speaking, so उनसे कहना please आहिस्ता रखें, but you can start.
Wait, I'm sorry, could I please confirm from my third speaker, first speaker, like she isn't replying me? I just want to confirm कि वो online है. Can I just get a second?
That's okay. Just let me know when you've confirmed.
Yes, I'm calling her.
Okay, perfect. Prop one, you have the floor.
All right. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. And three things to note in our framing before my argumentation. Firstly, what does our world look like? This plumb bob exists from the start of our world. The world has integrated this plumb bob into its functions. Therefore, the perception across various things that I'm going to further talk about in my debate will not exist on our side. But secondly, what does this plumb bob itself look like? Two things. Firstly, there's a general reflection of your mental health as a whole, as to how you've been feeling over a time period. We don't have the burden to prove the specifics of how the plumb bob will work, but still, for the sake of this debate, we'll tell you that it is just a general reflection of your mood, which means that it will give you an accurate depiction of what you're feeling like. Secondly, you cannot trick it in any way. But thirdly, it does not give out details as to why you're feeling in a specific way. So therefore, if opposition has any concerns regarding privacy, I think they are dealt with, because it tells you that, because we're telling you it does not give out any specific details as to why you're feeling in a specific way. But thirdly, how is mental health usually perceived in status quo? And that's something we want to change. Two things to note over here. Firstly, there's a large stigma around mental health. That is, the mental health is something that ought not to be talked about, or it's a very sensitive or touchy topic that not everyone should. But secondly, it's something that is very, very inaccessible. That is to say, facilities to treat mental health, but also not knowing when something is wrong with you. That is to say, some people are in denial about having mental health issues in the first place. So, with that said, what's our burden then in this debate? It's to prove to you that mental health for these people is better off in our side of the world. With that said, what's our first line of argument? How the plumb bob raises mental health awareness. Two tiers to this argument. Firstly, the tier on integration. For tier on integration. Note that there's far less when you have when you live in a world where this issue is far less ignorable, because it is literally you have literally an active plumb bob over your head. You have grown up seeing this. It is normalized. It is part of your society from the start. There are you're less likely to have stigmas around you to develop because of three things. Firstly, there's more discourse around this topic, because when everyone has this plumb bob over their head, you're more likely to talk about why this exists in the first place, or why, or what do you want to do with it to improve your mental health. But secondly, because people will take it more seriously, because know that people will not write it off what people are saying as a joke when you have a physical representation of what you're feeling like, because that is what usually happens in status quo. If you're feeling down or something like that, people will admit that it's not something serious or not something that needs to be dealt with in a proper manner. But thirdly, there are preconceived notions in status quo which will not exist in our side of the world, because people what do in the status quo is that when you have a issue of a mental health, they usually perceive it as something as a one-time thing, or it will go away if you give them, for example, if you give them something that they want, for example, a happy meal or something like that. But that won't happen because we realize that it is a serious issue and you want to treat it properly. You will do that in our side of the world. But second tier of this argument, accessibility. Know that the biggest barrier to having mental health and treating mental health is not knowing that you have a problem yourself. You think that you will feel better in a time, it will wear off after some time. But if it is something that like depression or bipolar disorder, this will further amplify due
A
to you
point.
being in denial because you don't understand a serious issue that you have to deal with yourself. If you do not know that something is wrong with you, then you cannot ask for help through anyone and you cannot get better in any instance. On a comparative, if something is wrong, you're going to figure it out on our side because you have an active blob on your head. On your head. This means that we are helping three type of people. Firstly, people who want help, because why they're able to help out, because we're making them more accessible to having facilities that will be able to help them out. And secondly, we're also able to help people out who do not know what's wrong with them, people who are in denial, people who do not want to confront this issue head on. We make them realize it's the actual issue that they have to deal with. And thirdly, people even who want to change something about it but cannot do so because they don't have the facility to. So we make mental health awareness more accessible to them. Three impacts then. Firstly, those who cannot talk about these issues, like people, like men in conservative societies, or people will have less stigma around us because they will have an easier time accessing and accepting this issue in the first place. Or things like people having perceived notions about rich people not having mental health issues because they have money and everything. Will be so all of these people who are hesitant in status quo to deal with this stuff themselves and by society will be catered to in our side of the world. But secondly, not everyone can afford facilities like therapy, etc. But in our side of the world, when you are making it more accessible, because when everyone knows about this issue in the first place, you make it more and more accessible. Thirdly, you motivate people to practice self-care or engage in stress activities and motivate them to take up proactive steps to improve well-being, because now they're not in a denial. They know something is wrong with them. They have to do something to improve this, and they're an actual incentive in our side, not only an actual incentive but also a reason to improve, because now they know that something is wrong with them. They have to do something about it. Before I move to the second argument, sure, I'll take that point.
If I don't know what's wrong with me and there's this ball telling me that I have bad mental health, how do you ensure that does not lead to paranoia?
Yeah, sure. Two things here. Firstly, if you do not know what's wrong with you, you'll obviously try something out differently or try to remove certain bad habits from your life that may try to improve you. If something is not working, you try something other than that. So at some point in time, you will have something going for you by seeing that the blob is working in your way. Even if that's not the case, at least in our side of the world, you will be able to access help or ask other people as to how you can change that, how you can be different, how you can change your mental health. Because when you note that, you realize that outside you have something wrong with you, when you're accepting that, that is the first step you're taking. That is an important step to do something about it, something you cannot have in opposition's world. With that said, our second line of argument, how it allows for people to better look after you. For the first argument was on an individual level. This is on how society can help you out. Four tangents to this. Firstly, people are hesitant to speak of in status quo. They're not who to talk to, how to talk to. When there is an active blob over your head, people can obviously realize that something is wrong, so they can treat you with caution, so they cannot abuse yourself or something like that, because they know that you're already in a vulnerable position. But secondly, when faced with issues like mental health, people behave differently. They start to space out because their mood is not to vibe, because they don't want to vibe anymore. For example, if as a single mom, I have too many financial constraints to deal with, I will not feel like having beer with my girlfriends over the weekend. When you start doing this, and you people around you think you do not understand what you're doing and why you're doing that, why you're behaving differently. They're doing this because they do not understand the burdens you're under, and because you have issues elsewhere. You therefore space out. They think you do not like them or stuff like that. So you feel much more lonely because you're not interacting, especially at a time where you need them the most. So what happens is, even if they wanted to help you, they cannot help you at all, because you do not know if something is wrong with you, and because you're spacing out, you are not in a mood to talk about these issues in the first place. But thirdly, we believe that in our side of the world, you have much more improved environments. That is to say, if areas like schools and workplaces which have a lot of anxiety attached to them because they're working in a tedious manner, you create a much more supportive environment over there. Because when you see everyone over in these areas having a blob that is going red, you can obviously feel that this is not an active environment where people will be productive and where people can work in a supportive manner. So you change you have an actual incentive to make these places more worthwhile, where people can sustain themselves, because this is not an actual place where people can have a life that is worth living. But fourthly, note that you can check out for people who are all starting to move towards depression, who are not entirely as bad as they would have been, but they're starting to move towards something that is going bad for them. So you're able to stop them from going completely into depression or something like that, because when you see them, the blob is slightly turning from green to yellow. You can check them over there. You can improve their condition over there before it becomes far worse. The impact of our arguments are threefold. First, we have much more improved relation on our side, because people who are not able to communicate very well are now able to see that there's something wrong with the person, with their loved one, so they can obviously do something about it. But secondly, you're less likely to fall down to such a degree where the issue is irrevocable or takes too much time to recover, because now you're obviously seeing something in the start. But thirdly, you have a healthier society in our side of the world, which is much more productive, because you're making environments that are much more beneficial for these people. For all those reasons, vote for side proposition. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that speech. Opposition one, whenever you're ready.
Can I just get 30 seconds?
Sure. Opposition one, are you ready now?
Just give me a bit. I'm sorry. Can I just bring water for myself?
Yep, sure.
Okay, am I completely audible?
Yep, you are. Go ahead.
Then Just give me a second. Yeah, make it fine. All right. Is the panel ready?
Yes,
I
please
start?
start. Yes.
I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I cry on the shoulders of the people that I trust because I know my mental health is something that is very intimate and very personal to me. Very, very proud to oppose. But firstly, what will my speech look like? Firstly, I'm going to give you a few responses and then I'm going to give you guys my own positive argumentation. Firstly, on their characterization about how they'll change the narratives around mental health as a whole. I don't think that's true because I think you then even if you do, you end up cultivating more and more harmful narratives around mental health. So your mental health becomes the epitome of your personality. This is something I'm going to analyze very, very carefully in my own positive case as well, how you spread more harmful narratives. But then secondly, but then secondly, but then secondly, the entire idea about if you want help, that I don't get how me having a ball over my head is now going to make me want help suddenly. I don't get how me having my emotions being my general mental health being displayed to the world is going to make me want to get help or be better. I don't get that. Thirdly, they don't give us any structural incentives on why would people actually look out for you, except for the people that love you will look out for you or something. This is something I think will materialize harmfully again, something which is also in our positive case. I will deal with that also. But then again, I don't get why people will look out for you either way. I think that generally society will be worse off because of the general perception of you, how it changes. Moving on to my own positive case then. Firstly, what does it mean for you to have a ball on your head that depicts your health? I think that means two things. A, this means your mental health and your action becoming hyper focused. So everyone being hyper focused on that ball and how you act about it. So this is how people act about their mental health. So this generally spreads a narrative that people are going to love you no matter what. So if for example, if I think Mama should love me unconditionally no matter what, and if her ball is red, that is now the perfect time for me to have the toothpaste if she loves me or not because her mental health is bad, right? But then secondly, how you deal with that mental health becomes very, very important and becomes very, very hyper focused. So how well you do despite your mental health being bad or despite your ball being red, and that becomes the epitome of focus of your personality. So it doesn't matter who I am, what I've been through. All that matters is the ball above my head. Moving on to our own positive case then. First argument then on how you have a constant personal pressure on you. A few ideas here. First, you generally know what's going on inside your brain, but then at the point in time you have this ball, that thing is also displayed to other people. So you have a hyper focus on your mental health and you start to worry about it. Why would you worry about it? A, because you're worrying if it's a slippery slope. So you have a lot of fear lingering around mental health. So is my ball red? Why is my ball red? But then B, it becomes the epitome of your personality. So it doesn't matter who I am, what I like, what I love. It only matters what my ball is showing right now. But then see in terms of your physical health on and your mental health, you now have this huge pressure on you to improve that health in any means possible, which we will tell you why that pressure is such a bad thing. But then secondly, you are under more exacerbated pressure when you're comparing emotions to each other. So why is that bad? So for example, if I broke up with my boyfriend, I am going to look at his ball. Hey, his ball hasn't turned pale. why mine has? Did that mean he never loved me? Did that mean that relationship never meant anything for him? So I think that you like compare your emotions to other people. Hey, both me and my best friend, we both failed this test. Why am I the only one whose ball is pale? And I think that leads to a lot of harmful things because you yourself now hyperfixate on your mental health and you're like generally trying to figure out like avenues of why has this happened, why is my ball like this, why is their ball not like this. And I think that leads to very harmful things, i.e. you like in like extreme circumstances you like even taking drugs to try to like improve your mental health and try to like improve your ball. But then what are the impacts? But then what are the impacts of this? A, you have a constant pressure of self-awareness on you. B, you constantly question everyone, like each and everyone around you, and you question like every relationship you've ever had. Then C, you hyperfixate on your mental health, trying to figure out what's wrong with you. What is it that happened that made you like this? And I think that's a very bad thing because it does lead to things like paranoia. It does lead to like bad things. Then secondly, on the idea about how mental health is very personal to you. Panel, I will only shed tears in front of someone I trust because me shedding tears in front of someone is something that's very intimate and personal to me. Personal to me. Now that my ball is the representation of my mental health, and like so essentially that means the world is like welcome to see me cry. The world is like welcome to see me in my very like vulnerable situations, and like now my mental health links to my life situation. I think that's really bad. But then secondly, second idea on about how you like left worse off in vulnerable situations. The premise here is very simple. Banner, most people go through a very drastic event that generally changes the course of their life. So, i.e., me maybe losing my father or me losing a relationship that mattered to me and on. Why is it so crucial? A, because that is the time when people are either most vulnerable, but also B, that is also like despite that vulnerability, that is also a time that people like want to get out of. So even if my father did pass away, I want to move on from that like very traumatic event. But then how do like people generally cope or try to move on from this? They just try to act like nothing happened. They try to like distract themselves, trying to talk to their friends, like try to have a semblance of a normal life that is essential for you to move on. But then first here within this, how you're always treated differently when you have this ball above you. Why? Because firstly, we only like I've already told you, even you that actually like love you, that are actually close to you, will treat you better. But then secondly, people will treat you differently, i.e., I won't talk to a person who has like whose ball is completely red because I don't want to deal with their emotions, right? And now I'm like starting to fear their actions because now I have to like constantly walk on eggshells to try to make sure my friend with like I don't know, like a pale ball isn't hurt. But then thirdly, people are simply treating you differently. You like your ball becomes the center of attention. So you have things like isolation, you have things like more judgment. Where the impact of this, you cannot access like happiness. But then thirdly, like you get reminded of that trauma because you're generally trying to figure out what went wrong, what happened to you. So you do end up resorting to very extreme measures, i.e., taking drugs to try to fix that ball on top of your head. Third idea then on about how you like make an avenue for exploitation. First, dear within this, realize that first within this, how people are able to like demean or dismiss your emotions. So she is only mad, her ball is only red, like she's only mad because her ball is red, not because I did something horrible. Not, so like I am now able to like excuse my horrible actions on her ball, and, like for all those reasons because I told you how you have worse off narratives, how you have worse mental health, on about how you like not able to access catharsis, access happiness, and you're reminded of that trauma. I think this is an easy BDC.
Thank you for that speech. Reminder to just speak for 8:15. Otherwise, after that, judges will stop writing. With that, proposition 2, you now have the floor.
Okay, let's get like 20 seconds.
Sure. Actually, I think Zen also disconnected, so we're waiting for him to come back as well. Then we'll start.
starting my speech in 2, 1. 3 things in my speech. Number 1, reconstructive. Actually, panel, not even reconstructive, just sort of pointing towards reconstruction that Cassian already did and telling you why that's so important. Then deconstructive, telling you why their case doesn't really stand. Thirdly, my own positive case. Coming towards the reconstructive portion of my speech. The only 2 things they actually engage with from our first speaker speech are 2 pieces of framing. We tell you that number 1, the plum bomb has already existed and the word has developed around it. They tell you that this will somehow lead to more harmful narratives developing. They never tell you why, not even their positive argumentation do they give you any sort of like structural reasoning as to why this is likely to happen. We already told you why this is not likely to happen. We told you that in a world where the plum bomb has existed as something which people like already consider normal, something which people like take as a normal facet of life, it is unlikely that this mental health is going to be viewed as something that is like untalked to, like you can't talk about, right? Because it's easy to ignore mental health when it's just something happening inside the confines of your mind, but it is hard for you to ignore that mental health when it is a physical thing floating above your head, right? Like this is really simple intuitive logic. If everyone has that plum bomb, if everyone can see that plum bomb from the day they're born to the day they die, I think that's something that is really, really easy to talk about even for the average person, right? I think therefore the stigmas that form around this are less likely to develop. I think that these harmful narratives are far less likely to develop on our side of the house. Second thing they actually engage with, the idea of like mental health stigmas and why they're so bad on our side of the house. They sort of simplify this a lot and they tell you that this is just going to be not wanting help. And they tell you that we're not telling you why they will want help. First of all, I think that's like grossly oversimplifying this point. I think mental health stigmas aren't just people who don't want help. It looks like people who aren't capable of reaching out for help, right? People who don't have the capacity to go out for help, people who feel stigmatized against, right? I think that even if you don't have like I think okay, but even then, I think this rebuttal doesn't really make any sense because insofar as you can't reach out for help, you oftentimes can't because people will deny you in reaching out for help, right? Men don't feel comfortable in reaching out for help because they feel as if they're going to be invalidated, as if their mental health and lived experiences are going to be ignored, right? You cannot ignore or deny those experiences when there is a physical representation of those experiences floating above your head, right? I think insofar as that is true, I think it's far less like
Point.
don't want to reach out for this help, right? Thirdly, we tell you something which deals with the majority of their positive case. We tell you the plum bomb is not like a doxing machine. It doesn't give out all of your private information. We tell you that it just tells you a general mood. I think they don't really deal with this point of framing or tell you why it's not likely to be true. I think that like insofar that like everyone automatically deals with a lot of their impacts, right? So 2 arguments we give to you then would have like literally no engagement on them. First idea on mental health awareness, we give you 2 tiers. Number 1, we tell you how it's integrated and how it's normalized, right? We give you 3 reasons as 3 ways in which it normalizes, right? We tell you discourse, we tell you it's taken more seriously, we tell you that there's less stigmas, right? Why exactly is this so important? I think that insofar as we have these 3 mechanisms, which are by the way not at all challenge at first opposition, like they completely stand. I think insofar as we have these 3 mechanisms, we can prove to you pretty easily that we have better mental health on our side of the house. Why is that? Because we tell you that people are more likely to talk about mental health. It's more likely to be a normalized topic of your society. We tell you that insofar as it's going to be a normalized topic and that topic is likely to be taken seriously, we tell you that these discussions around mental health, around men's mental health, around all of these sorts of mental health are far more likely to occur. Insofar as they're more likely to occur, we tell you that it's more likely that you're going to reach solutions, right? You're going to be like more comfortable reaching out to your friends and family when you're dealing with a mental health problem because you do something that you shouldn't hide from it. It's viewed as something as normal. It's viewed as something that you can deal with on the everyday basis, right? Compare that to the status quo. The status quo is a world where the average person does not feel comfortable reaching out about their mental health struggles to anyone other than their best friend. And even in their even within that, there are people who don't feel comfortable reaching out to their best friends, or they don't have anyone that they feel comfortable reaching out to, right? I think insofar as we provide new mechanisms as to why we're likely to solve that issue, we're simply better off because we simply have like easier ways for these people to get away with, right? Second tier then, this idea of accessibility. We tell you that it makes it a lot more easy for people who are stigmatized against to achieve this sort of mental health because it's far harder to deny them. We also tell you that the main issue with people who simply don't know that there is something wrong with them. They think I'm maybe just having an off day, I'm maybe having an off season, and that I should just like ignore it and maybe it'll get better later. But if you have that active physical representation, it's far less likely that people will simply brush it off because it's a representation of their long-term mental health, right? We tell you the first step of getting better is knowing that there is something wrong, and the plum bomb is like a really easy way to know that something is wrong. They don't tell you why this is unlikely to be true, and they don't tell you either why the benefit that you get from it, basically removing an entire step of the treatment process, is like a bad thing to occur, right? I think this makes therapy a lot more affordable and a lot easier to like access for a lot of people, because they don't have to make that first like really annoying step of going out, reaching out to a therapist, looking for a therapist, and getting an appointment, because they already have the motivation to like they have the motivation and general idea of what is wrong with them as a whole, right? Second argument we give you, this idea of like self-treatment. Three words within this. Number one, we tell you that other people are unlikely to treat you as poorly because they understand you're going through something rough, and you don't like, and people don't misinterpret your behavior, right? Understand someone who's going through something will act roughly towards other people. They don't engage with this at all. Second thing we tell you here, that supportive environments are more likely to develop. We tell you that there are active incentive structures that employers and schools have, that they know that these, if these people within our like workplaces and schools are unhappy, they're going to be unproductive. We tell you that this is easier to tell on our side of the house because plum bombs exist, right? We tell you that then these structures are more likely to be made supportive for these people, right? Insofar as we provide you a way that more supportive environments are going to be fostered, I don't think they disprove this to you either, right? I think insofar as we do that, I think we take away like a majority, like what some of the biggest sources of anxiety, right? On the simple weight, I think that's really, really important in this debate. Third idea we give you here, the idea of like catching people from spiraling, right? I think that's also really important, because one of the biggest ways that people like spiral into depression, etc., is simply because they don't really treat it early enough, right? You start spiraling slowly, and it gets worse and worse over time, and you simply don't catch it early enough, right? On the weights here, I think I've proven to you how we've proven to you that we simply provide better mental health, more accessible mental health, like a general environment within society that is like less offensive towards the average person. Generally, why mental health is going to be better. Dealing with their arguments really quickly, because I don't think they really stand. First of all, this idea of hyper focus and how you hyper focus in on this idea of mental health. I think that people are unlikely to focus in on your mental health that severely, simply because like this is something that's normalized within society, right? Even if they do hyper focus within your within your mental health, I don't think that's likely to be an awful thing, right? I think that insofar as people are focused upon your mental health, they're not going to like heartless monster that is going to say that guy feels really bad, we should make him feel worse, right? Like that is not the kind of world we live in, right? Their second first argument, I don't really understand how they signpost this. They tell you that you're likely to spiral into more depression because you're going to like see that you're doing more and be stressed and anxious about it. I don't think that's true, because this plum bomb does not reflect your momentary mental health, but rather your general mental health, right? They tell you then that people will be worried. I think that's a good thing about you, right? I think people ought to be worried if you're going through a rough patch, right? But also I don't think people are going to think less of you if you're going through like some bad things, right? Like, I think it's a pretty open secret on the circuit that maybe I'm not the most mentally stable person, but I don't think anyone on the circuit thinks any less of me because of that, right? Secondly, they tell you that people are going to compare. Yeah, I think it's a good thing that you compare yourself to other people. I think that when you get that comparison, you get some sort of perspective on other people. I think if your shitty boyfriend leaves you and he's feeling a-okay after the breakup, you understand that that guy was not worth getting hung up over, right? He felt good about breaking up with you. He did not value the relationship at all. That perspective is valuable to you, and you will get over that easier, right? They tell you that hyper focus is going to be like really, really important. I don't think so. They use the idea that you only cry to your friends. I think that number one, you have like your mood is something that is exhibited to the entire society, right? But also, I think that insofar as it is integrated within society, I think it's far less likely that people are going to like view this as that bad of a thing, right? I think we proved to you here today that why we have better mental health, why we have more accessible mental health, and why we just win on all issues. Opposition does not do their basic burden of engaging with the proposition. I think based on that alone, we take this debate. For all those reasons, so proud to propose. Please vote for props.
Thank you for that speech. Again, a reminder to not speak longer than 8:15. With that, opposition 2, you now have the
Can I
floor.
please get 15 seconds?
Sure.
All right, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Just a second.
Opto.
Yes. All right. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, and 1. I'll tell you how your privacy is still violated, panel, because your mental health is generally a representation of, say, your childhood traumas, what you go through, your breakups, your successes or failures. And even though the ball does not say that out, you know for a fact that is what it represents. I.e., every time I walk out on the street and I'm sad because of certain reason, or am I like going through an episode of depression, everybody sees that ball and looks at it and then treats me accordingly. I know that the reason I'm sad is maybe because my boyfriend broke up with me, because someone passed away, or maybe I flunked that test. That is what I'm continuously reminded of. That is what I keep on thinking when people treat me differently. That is a proper violation of privacy, panel. Very, very proud to propose. They cannot just get away with it by saying that the board like does not stay out. As far as I as an individual know that this is why I'm feeling bad, and now everybody can see that. Everybody can see my tears, i.e., I still like carry all those things with me. But then, onto like what my speech looked like. I feel like bringing back like my own case and telling you how they like never dealt with this, but then like very quickly onto like the idea about like the most vulnerable, like depressed people getting access. So, i.e., people who like were in denial or refused to get help in the first place. Firstly, yes, this event exists in a bubble, i.e., we're debating in a world where the comparative for me is not to show to you a world like how within this world a taboo won't exist, but how like in a world where when you are born with a ball on your head, what will it look like? I.e., if I'm someone who, if an individual is born into this world who is someone who doesn't really care about or like are in a constant denial of their mental health, the shame and the taboo, yes, does not exist. That is that these people are still likely to not, i.e., seek help, etc., or like acknowledge that they are bad, simply because now the shame does not exist, but also them within themselves have the like them, they have like the incentive to not talk about it, i.e., a world where yes, the shame or the taboo around mental health does not exist. A person who won't have the incentive to maybe talk about like their mental health or go get treatment will still not like have that incentive, simply because the ball is out there, or the ball is red, simply because that is like a part of their nature. In a world where people are born with that ball, those people like are still aren't dealt with. But then be mild people, so maybe I'm someone like whose ball is pale, maybe I'm someone who like needs slight help. I think even in a world where like you don't have these balls on the head of people who are like going through slight episodes of depression or sadness still have things like friends and family helping out for them. So people who know why I'm sad, people who know that I'm not like the jolly person, I'm not cracking jokes, those people are still going to help me. But B, I think this is going to be far better, because now people are going to be fixated on the fact that my ball is like turning pale or might turn red, or people are like judging me on the base of the very fact, I think then these people are still very much like better off at outside of the house. Then what do they tell you? They tell you that the ball like exists still like from the start of your life. So things like taboo don't exist, right? This wasn't the point of our case panel. This is not the comparative. What we told you was that this or your mental health then becomes the epitome of your personality. A, everybody knows what you are going through, but B, people watch your actions according to like what you are doing. And this is what we told you, i.e., people or close friends knowing that hey, you are going through episode of depression and how or like what you are likely to react and maybe testing you according to that. But B, people are simply treating you differently when you are someone who cannot put on a happy face now because everyone knows. I.e., if I'm suffering from like if something happened at my home or maybe someone passed away and I want to like move on, I might want to like go to a debate tournament and engage myself. But now there is a red ball on top of my head. Every educator knows that I'm going through something. Every person knows that I'm going through something. They're likely going to treat me differently. They're likely going to eye me differently. And I'm going to see that difference in treatment. I.e., I'm never going to access that normalcy I'm so yearning for. But then secondly, I think like society perception like things like hey, men are supposed to be stronger or like showing like your emotions are expressions of femininity and are inferior will still very much exist. They give us no incentive structures as to why like those narratives fail to exist when their ball is present, i.e., society can still in a patriarchal society can still run narratives about, i.e., maybe people who are religious should not be depressed, men should not be depressed, or maybe women are people who are more sensitive. You having a ball out there does not solve that. In fact, I think you're likely going to have more narratives, i.e., news channels feeding you narratives. Hey, 20% more women have red balls at their like heads compared to men. I think then all of these narratives can still very well exist even when like people have that ball on top of their head. The reason they exist is not because people do not know that men go through mental health issues, is because they want to pose to the world that men should not go through mental health issue, or that it's a sign of weakness that they go through that mental health issue. That's still going to happen. But B, this is going to be worse off when men are told that hey, you are supposed to be strong even when your ball is dead. So they take upon the responsibility to like act in a certain way or like not act very, very vulnerable. They never give us incentive structures as to why these narratives or these stigmas are not going to like exist. But then what did we bring to this? We told you firstly the idea of like you constantly like maybe being in a comparison. But we told you things like, hey, me wondering why am I sad when the other person is not? Am I too sensitive? These issues. Or me wondering why I just like failed a test. Why is my friend not so sad? Am I too sensitive? Can I not bear with this? Will I be like more sad if I fail another test? These comparisons are still exist. They just tell you they are good. They don't like give you a refutation to this. But then secondly, I tell you that you're likely going to have a pressure to like like maintain a good mental health or like not be sad in the very first place, maybe like within your relationship. And it's like an extension, right? So people in a society where this like red ball is always shown are like going to have a trouble finding relationships, i.e., friend circles usually avoiding people who have a red ball on their head, people not wanting to go out to dates with people or not wanting to stay in relationships with people who are constantly depressed, because now they know that these people are going to suffer, because they know that like this is something they cannot avoid. But then thirdly, this was like very, very important, we told you that people generally go through like severe moments in their life, so death of a loved one, etc. The way people get out of these moments is by like getting into the normalcy of life and acting like nothing is happened. This cannot happen because now I can never access this normalcy, because now everyone can see that red ball on my head, i.e., I can never really fake my smile. That normalcy is taken away from me. I can never really step out of this. People eye me differently, people date me differently. But then onto like an extension of like the idea of exploitation that happens three ways. Firstly, people demeaning your emotions, i.e., my parents telling me that you cannot decide for yourself because you're depressed right now. My partner telling me that I lashed out not because what he said was wrong, but because I'm depressed because my ball is red. But then secondly, in terms of like people like women within society being told by like other people that hey, your mental health is bad, let me help you, let me like give you physical comfort, or maybe you should open up to me. These narratives can lead to like exploitation and can lead to like a lot more coercion, especially when these people are the ones who need the most help. But then third, in terms of like monetary value. Jobs and employers who hire you have a lot of incentive to not hire people or to fire people who are going through this like mental health issues because they want to maintain productivity. There's no use having a person who has like that constant ball on the head for all those reasons. And I stopped at 8:15. Oppose.
Thank you so much for that speech. Proposition 3, you now have the floor.
Can I have like 30 seconds?
But also, my third speaker mentioned his net was glitching. I'm just going to call and check if he's in the call right now or if he can hear me.
Okay, sure, that's fine. Proposition 3, just wait a second.
Audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. There's a couple of things I want to make explicitly clear. Firstly, what is ops burden? They have to prove to you why A, the status quo as it is fundamentally good for people with mental health problems, and it is in fact better than our entire model to you. They don't do that. The only thing that they need to prove to you is that our model is at any way better than the status quo. The entire case then falls. But secondly, our world itself, right? We think in this world, this plumb bob has been existing throughout, which means that society is fundamentally different than the society you currently have. And within this, I want to talk about social preconceptions, right? The opposition cannot just come up here and claim that no, society will not change and you will still have conceptions, because that is something that is fundamentally incompatible in a world where people are forced to come face to face with their mental health, right? Where because within the status quo, the social perceptions that are going to exist in opposition's world are that your mental health should be hidden. We tell you that in our world, where you have a plumb bob actively
A
displaying
point.
time, no thank you, all times, all of your mental health, it is fundamentally impossible for you to propagate those narratives of hiding your mental health, right? So those preconceived notions about men's mental health being something to be ashamed of do not have any place in our world. But moving on, then there's two issues I want to talk about in this debate. Firstly, where do individuals themselves have better ways to deal with mental health? But secondly, where society in general better off? On the first issue, then we tell you two major things most of us never engage with. On our first idea about denial of problems, right? And by the way, the only thing we told you in this was not denials, right? We never told you that people are just going to deny it. That's the only thing they engage with. So the other two warrants we had to you about A, people being incapable of reaching out for help because because their households do not let them do so, because they have a stigma against them, that does still stand. But B, because they feel ashamed with their mental health and do not want to come face to face with it, that does still stand.
A point.
Endpoints. I'll take you before the second issue, not before that. But thirdly, then, on the idea of denial, right? We told you that you are going to be in denial because you do not want to come face to face with having a mental problem. Why is this so? Because in the status quo, in opposition's world, people think that mental health is something to be afraid of, something to be ashamed of. That is the reason they are living in denial of it. Why do we fix that on our side of the house? We fix it when you are literally forced to actively show what your mental health is. We are fine with you forcibly showing it because the benefits you could possibly gain by this, that you now are being forced to get actual help because of this, is something that outweighs any possible harm on this, right? We are still able to achieve this major endpoint of ours on proposition. But secondly, we think that these individuals themselves are now in a more accepting society, right? That means your friends around you, as the people in general around you, are going to be more accepting of your mental health, right? They won't treat you any differently because they don't think that you having a mental health problem is
A point, sir?
being isolated, right? They won't think that you now deserve to be locked away in a corner. Rather, they will want to approach you and give you advice and tell you that you should perhaps reach out to people who are actually concerned about you. But comparatively, they had four things here. First idea there about hyperfixation. I am completely fine with people hyperfixating on it and you being forced to change it. Why am I fine with this? Because simply now you are forced to actually come face to face with that problem. You are forced to then go to things like therapists and actually find out why exactly my blob is red, what problems I'm in fact facing. Secondly, this idea about you having paranoid relationships. I do not think it is relevant for the simple fact that InfoSite tells us this blob does not change on short-term occurrences, right? It's only about long-term mental health problems. So I don't think you're just going to wake up one day, your boyfriend is going to be pale, and you're going to have an existential crisis. I don't think that's something that's relevant, that's actually going to happen, right? But thirdly, then this idea about you being put under a ton of pressure about fixing your mental health. Again, that is absolutely good, right? That is a benefit on our side of the house, simply because then people are actually being put into pressure to do something, right? They can't just live in denial. They can easily bypass that initial gate of overcoming their own stigma or overcoming their own embarrassment and actually being pushed by other people around them to go to the therapist in the first place. But thirdly, then this very weird idea they had about you being isolated from against people who are red. We don't think that's going to be true, right?
A point?
Are going to isolate you completely just because you're going through a mental difficulty, then those aren't your actual friends, right? You shouldn't be friends with those people, with those people. But secondly, we don't think that people are going to act negatively towards you. Why is this so? Because we told you that within this world, mental health is something that isn't private. It is something that is public. We are fine with that
Point?
because people don't view it as something that should be ashamed, right? People don't view it as something that should deserve to be isolated. Rather, those people are going to approach you, give you advice, refer you to therapists, etc. They're actually going to tell you based on how you can fix your current issue. The way up on this debate becomes incredibly simple. If I'm willing to concede to every single argument they had in this class, that yes, so people are going to hyperfixate on you. Yes, you're going to have immense amounts of pressure. Yes, you are going to be paranoid of all your relationships. And sure, some people might leave you. All of that is a way up I'm willing to take, because on our side of the house, you have actually, because all of that feeds into our argumentation about people actively helping you to
Please
deal with
take one.
you are now actually forced to go to a therapist and actually deal with the problems that you currently have. For the second issue, then sure, I'll take your point.
My mother passed away and I want to continue with my life. I go out and the AC team sees this red deep ball on my head. Am I not going to be treated differently, i.e., with sympathy, with eyes of tears that remind me of what I'm going through?
Why don't you want to be treated with sympathy, right? Why don't you want to feel comfort from people who actually care about you? That is something that people want when they are in grief, to know that they aren't alone, they aren't suffering alone. In fact, suffering alone, something that happens on your side, is what leads to mental health problems in the first place. Second class, then, where society in general better off? We tell you two things: that A, you have more accessibility, i.e., in places like the third world, you have more access to support structures, for example, therapists. You do remove that inherent taboo against things like mental health. But secondly, you remove things like paywalls as well, right? We don't see mental health as being something only for the rich, and poor people shouldn't worry about it. It is something that is common in everyone. It unites people. It's a fundamentally humanizing experience. At that point, then your capacity for approaching someone for your mental health troubles is greatly better off on our world, because on their world, those taboos, especially within religious places about against mental health, are still going to fundamentally exist. But secondly, we told you that you're now, but secondly, the idea that they give us here, that is going to be a violation of your privacy. And here's the thing here. I do not think that mental health should be something that is inherently private to you only, right? You should be left alone to deal with it. I am completely fine if everyone on the street is going to come up to you and offer you their sympathies, and everyone is going to know what you are dealing with, simply because of the fact that in this world, since people are now more open about mental health, they are more accepting of the impacts of mental health, they are more likely to treat you better, right? Because within their society, it is something that should be treated better. It isn't something that should be ashamed of. For that simple reason, then we think privacy is better off on our side, simply because you now have more avenue of getting better, because society is generally more accepting of you, and you people and just because you are facing a loss of a loved one and are going through grief, you won't be locked into a corner and told to be ashamed of who you are and how you're acting and why you're crying. But second, why you're crying then? The way up then becomes incredibly simple. On our side of the house, you have a world in which mental health is no longer stigmatized, right? Where people don't think that you should be ashamed of that, ashamed of the grief you're going through. We are then able to unlock all of our arguments. Everything we prove to you still stand. They aren't able to fulfill their basic burden of reasonable doubt. Their status quo is fundamentally bad. They never protected their own status quo. They never do that comparison for you. So proud to propose.
Okay, thank you so much for that speech. Opposition 3.
Could I just quickly come from the washroom?
Yep, sure.
Thank you very much. All right. All right, panel, I'm going to first go over a few strategic mistakes made by side proposition. Then I'm going to go into my two clashes. The first one being which side deals with mental health better, and the second being a stakeholder analysis. All right. So firstly, their entire push is that of normalization of this crystal ball and the normalization of mental health issues, leading to less stigmatization. We've already told you how this is not true, but let me just bring back that debate, right? So what do we tell you here? What we tell you is that stigmatization will still occur, because just by mere fact of normalization, that inherent issue is not going to be less of a taboo. We see this through sort of an analogy would be of your body, right? You're born with your body, but there's still body dysmorphia, and there's still stigmatizations around different types of bodies. So there's still stigmatization during normalization, and we also think there's incentives for this to occur. How we tell you this is that there's a mechanism of exclusion. This is a mechanism they did not deal with, where we tell you that on a social level, there will still be value judgments going against you, being passed against you, where you're identified as being not good, your crystal is not green. So what happens then is that people don't like to associate with you because you're unstable, right? And you're not going to have that desirable archetype which would fit into that specific social circle. So these people with higher orbs than you are going to actively exclude you. This also happens on a professional basis, on a professional level, which is a main push that we bring that they do not contend with, where we tell you that exploitation occurs professionally, where an illustration would be that a poor person who is sick would be, or who has a bad crystal, is not going to be given the same equal job opportunities as the other person. So the point in time this happens, we feel like even if there's more discourse, you have people who are denied equal opportunity, and a society where there's no equal opportunity is a society which is unfair to general people, and there's disproportionate gain to people with green orbs, right? Their second push is then that due to normalization, people won't bully you, which is just not true, and it's a lie. Why this is a lie is because, again, value judgments are still passed, and since there's an in-group mechanic where people with different blobs associate with each other and go actively against people with the lower bobs, what's going to happen is that these people then don't like you. They're likely not going to hire you as a job, and in social circles, they're going to look at you unfavorably. Their meta assumption here is that just by knowing that there's a problem leads to you having an understanding of that problem, right? This is again not true, and they haven't given us an incentive or a mechanism through which they're going to understand that problem, or how people in general are going to have more empathy, right? Because that's why people care about you when you have more empathy. We feel like on that sense, let me co-opt their argument of how society would be more acceptable. Again, this is not true. We've just told you that it's on the basis of empathy. So only people who are close to you are going to care about how you actually feel. The point in time that is true. We feel like there's no benefit that is exclusive on their side on this case. Now let's get down to the clashes. Firstly, where mental health is better solved. What do they say? Their first argument is about awareness increasing, right? Again, this is not true, as I already told you, how just because there's awareness doesn't mean people understand the issue more, doesn't mean people are going to tackle that issue more, and doesn't imply that people are going to to have more empathy, even in the real world, when people know that there's people with these specific disorders, schizophrenics, and people who have paranoia in general, and people of other archetypes, other normal archetypes, people with bipolar disorder. These people are actively discriminated against, and just because people know that there's an issue, it doesn't imply that there's awareness. You might know what bipolar disorder is, but that doesn't imply you're going to have empathy with the person who has bipolar disorder in a professional place, and you're not going to be, from an interview outlook, going to give them a favorable proposition, or even from society in general, right? Then they say that just because there's awareness and this all is open and mental illness is open, therapy is somehow going to be cheaper. We feel like this is not true, because they're just making these frog leaps from different assertions. And again, there is no warrant for this claim, and there's no evidence for this claim. And how likely is it that just by mere fact of more awareness, these therapists are going to lower their prices, and they're going to have more empathy and want to help these people more, and out of this altruistic sense, they're going to sort of lower their prices? This is again not true. So on that point, they don't have anything there. Secondly, on how there's going to be discourse, let's take you on your best course where there's discourse. We feel like, again, this doesn't promote empathy or understanding. And what happens then when you have discourse? You have an hyper focus on this issue, right? Because that's what discourse does. It highlights that issue. So the more discourse you have, the more you're fixated on this issue. And this brings back what we've told you at op1, how having hyper focus increases stigmatization, increases social exclusion and economic exploitation. How you have how people who want to exploit you and bad with actors have a comparative advantage over you when there's an hyper focus, and how there's general dysmorphia, or again, this is not contended with, and their own best case provides that there's a hyper focus. So on that point, we win. Secondly, how since it's more accessible, so people who do deny it cannot go against it at all, right? So there's also a point here. I'll deal with this more on my second clash, but a nuance here to address is that there's still a professional incentive to deny things. Why? Because if you're having professional exclusion and exclusion from social circles, you're likely to scapegoat your mental health issues onto other issues. You're likely to deny them. You're likely to hide from society. You're likely to even go visit these therapists because of the value judgments that are being so intensified. So again, these are unique harms on side opposition, where we have a comparative case. This unique harm of having more stigmatization, having hyper focus, and so the impact there is that people will deny things more. We feel like we're flipping their arguments on them. And so in general, people will deny things because they feel and they fear social exclusion and professional exclusion. We've proved to you how this is more intensified on our case and more extensified. So on the way up, the scale of impact and the depth of impact of having more denying people on our side is less, as opposed to their side, where there's more people who deny it, right? So now what else do they say? They say that just because they say that it will be open to everyone, and just by virtue of this fact, it will motivate self-help. Now let's weigh what we've said to you. We've said to you that just because it's open to everyone, people know the problem, it doesn't imply that they're going to take proper decisions. They don't know the root causes. So what happens then? Now, their second characterization also plays into here. I'm taking their best case. It's that people are motivated to take self-help and other actors are motivated to help them. What happens then? These other actors may not necessarily give out the best opinions, and you listen to them. So people who are gurus, who don't know anything about what they're doing, are going to give you advice. You're going to take that advice, and that advice is going to backfire, and you'll have this very unique harm on you. Another tangent here is that people inherently look for cheap and fast alternatives. So this help-self mechanism of looks maxing and whatnot, these things that have a hyper-focus make you hyper focus on things and generally make you adopt bad practices which give you harm, are going to be accentuated. Thirdly, their second important push is that there will be preemptive change. Now this tackles our own alternative, so to speak, where they say that you'll see this shift of color slightly fading, and so you'll preemptively go and look at this again. Assuming that things are normalized, you're not going to, these gradual shifts are going to be normalized, and people likely won't care for them. The point in time this is true, people will likely not achieve actual help and will go to cheap and fast alternatives. So on the way, what happens is that people do take more serious precaution for helping themselves, but they do not take proper, adequate quality medical assurances for these gradual shifts since it's so normalized. And so what happens is people who have genuinely structural issues will not likely do anything. What do we say? We say the cause is unknown. So you have to try these different methods, and the more methods you try, the likelihood of you having a misdiagnosis or having this waste goes higher. And again, due to small issues, you might waste time and money going to these doctors to get checked out, and you might be overdiagnosed, and this more diagnosed, you are the worse it will be for you. And again, on far as I prove this, we feel like we win this. Very proud to oppose.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that speech. With that speech, the substantive part of this debate is over. Opposition reply, you now have the floor.
Yes, just a second. I'll be setting my mic. Am I audible?
Yep, you're audible. Go ahead.
Could you please reset the timer? Yes. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, and 1. I had a big job interview, but that night my best friend passed away. The next day, when I go to that job interview, that red ball, like going deep red, is visible on my head. And they don't hire me because they know that I'm in a mental distort state. They think whether or not I'll be able to do that work or not. We have monetary harm, you have like an erosion of trust within society. For that reason, we are very proud to oppose. This was something we brought to you. This was something they never dealt with. What my reply deal with this? The idea of like how society is going to treat you now in this side of the world, and whether or not like exploitation happen or whether or not privacy is eroded. The only problem they had side proposition would like you to believe with like mental issue or mental health was that it was hidden or society wanted you to hide it. And now that there's a red ball on your head and it's not hidden, it's solved because the motion sector. So what did we tell you? We gave you structural reasons as to why our issue is not people treating mental health worstly or people treating you nicely or not. We told you that there are structural reasons as to why people who are suffering through mental health issues or people who they know are vulnerable differently. Here we brought you the idea
I'm
of
so sorry, Mama. Can you pause for a second? One of the other
yes.
judges dropped out. We're just gonna wait for her to reconnect. I hope
Yes,
she
all right.
joins soon. Okay, so I see you're back in the meeting. Can you hear me?
Yes, should I start resume?
No, Mama, a second.
Oh, sorry.
Sibha?
I thought you were talking to me.
No, I'm asking the parents.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
I'm
but
so sorry for that.
did you miss the entire first minute of the reply script?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, Mama, is it possible for you to start from the start?
Yeah.
Okay, ठीक है. Just start from the very beginning.
Okay. I'll be starting in 3, 2, and 1. I have a job interview tomorrow, but my best friend passed away last night. I go to a job interview with a deep red ball on my head, and I'm not hired because those people know and wonder whether or not I'll be capable enough or I'm in the mental condition enough to work. This is not as one example. This happens every time when I step out on the street, go to a class, come to a debate tournament, go to an arts class, join a cooking class. People wonder whether or not I'm good enough to do something. People kick me out of opportunities because I'm feeling bad, because now I cannot put on that strong feeling or show them that even though I'm feeling bad, I can still act about it, because other people are always going to know and are still going to judge the people I'm working for, but B is going to be like a lot more prevalent. What did they bring you like then? And like the major issue with the debate about like where people are like likely to treat you better. The only push was that where they had make you believe that the only problem that exists with like mental health is people hide it, and now that the red ball is out there and because it's prominent, it's solved because the motion sector. What do we tell you? We tell you that there are structures as to why people deal differently when they know people are going through mental health issues and when people are vulnerable. And here's where idea of exploitation came in. Why do we as a society consider mentally weak people or people who are like going through mental suffering vulnerable? Because those people likely lean onto people and are coerced, but B, those people are likely to believe in the society when they tell them something. I.e., I don't tell every person that I cried in my room last night because I feel like I'm not giving good speeches, because that is valuable to me. But B, I only trust the closest people off with these details or with my tears, i.e., my best friend, my mother, because I know that those people are not going to treat me differently or make assumptions about me, even though I know they know when I'm going through something. What happens at this side of the world is people see your vulnerability and likely like judge you based up like on them. But B, they know that you're going through different scenarios, i.e., so people around me know that I'm suffering because something happened to me and then likely deal with me differently or judge me according to this. But see, very few people in the society are ever going to care about helping, because when they see a red ball, they know this is something that's going to be hard to do. They know it's going to take a lot of effort. They know it's going to take for them to know me to ever help me. What's going to be far easier is to talk about me or to give me eyes of sympathy or glances. Far less people are like ever going to show me any eviction of real help. But see, like people within my family or people who care about me are likely going to tell me to like avoid falling into like mental health issues in the very first place, or just like hate me for that, because now they know it's something out there. So just like how your parents hate you when you fall sick on the night of your exam and they know that you're not going to do well, this is simply going to happen in terms of like your relationships, in terms of like your special moments. But D, even like when people aren't willing to exploit you, this is like where we told you that the point in time you go through like a tragic event in life, you want to move on. This is why when someone's family members pass away, they go through things like drinking or going to parties or partying with their friends, because they can put a fake smile, they can put like everything is okay, they can't like they aren't reminded of it every second. At your side of the house, this is never going to happen. People are always going to be reminded of what they are going through, of why they are going through, and they are always going to like be treated differently because of that. Because inherently, it's a part of our human nature to treat people who we know are suffering, who we know are weak, very, very differently. It might not be exploitative, but it still counts. But then B, give you a whole structure as to why this can lead to exploitation. For women, when their spouses tell them that they're overreacting. For people who disrespect me but tell me that I'm overreacting because I'm sad. For employers who can fire me because I'm sad. They never deal with our exploitation part. But then they only push the stigmatization is that because there's a ball on my head. I don't understand why. People in the status quo still talk about how people are sad or why they're going through different things. Simply because there's a red ball on your head does not mean the stigmatization is going to go left side. People still hate people who are like going through body dysmorphia. For all those reasons, oppose.
Thank you for that speech. Prop reply. You now have the floor to close the debate. Yep.
I'll make this debate really, really clear. Wait, okay, I'll make this debate really, really clear, right? First of all, a mechanism on stigmatization, or whether it's less like Uber on our side of the house. We give you a really, really intuitive and simple mechanization on why this is likely to occur. We tell you that these balls are likely to be there from the beginning of time, the beginning of civilization. Therefore, that means that mental health is something that you cannot ignore. Mental health is not just something that exists within your mind, it's something that exists visually that people can see, right? Therefore, it is more likely that people are going to discuss this, and it becomes a regular topic of discussion within society. Therefore, it is more likely that this will be destigmatized in terms of discussion. Therefore, it's more likely that people will be talking about it, and it's less stigmatized to come forward and tell people that maybe I have a problem with this thing or that thing. Therefore, the stigmatization, etc., is less likely to occur. This is the same analysis Kessler told you. This is the same analysis I told you. They don't deal with this. They just like try and lie to you and tell you that we don't have mechanization. That's not how debating works, guys. You can't just like lie to the panel and hope that they buy it. I don't think that they should really do that. Secondly, they don't really engage with any of our positive case, right? I think opposition is far too concerned in this debate about their own positive argumentation as opposed to taking down and proving reasonable doubt upon our argumentation, right? That'll be glaringly obvious in my issues when I just have like a laundry list of words and reasoning, which I can't really rebuild because they were never like broken down in the first place, right? Thirdly, they tell you this idea that the main thing in this debate was where exploitation is more likely to occur. I don't think that's true. I think this debate primarily took place on where the mental health for the person is going to be better, right? I think they try to like flip this and reply because they understand they're losing upon mental health of the individual, and I think that just doesn't exist. But still, two responses to the idea of professionalism. Number one, I think that anti-discriminatory laws, Musa told you, this already exist, right? The government is an active incentive to step in, right? I think insofar as those anti-discriminatory laws exist, people are unlikely to like not get hired on this scenario. Secondly, then I think that it's highly unlikely that people will be going out for interviews following like traumatic life events. I think that's like a very minute part of like the population, but even then the government exists to protect them, right? Secondly, people are already within jobs who are maybe going through traumatic experiences, etc., right? I think those people then, like their employers have active incentive structures, as I told you a second, to make more supportive environments for those people because they can easily identify this person will be unproductive if we do not help them. I tell you all of this analysis a second that we will actually create supportive structures. They never attacked it. It stands in this debate. You ought to credit it, and we ought to just like take this entire push, right? Two issues in this debate then, really quickly. First of all, the issue of like better mental health. They tell you that you're going to hyperfixate. I think that's actually like even in our worst case scenario, I think that's a better thing than just disassociating and ignoring the problem as a whole, right? I think the hyperfixation is going to be better than you just saying that's not really a problem. I shouldn't worry about that. Until one day you're wondering what you did with your life, you're having like a midlife crisis and you're entirely depressed, right? On the simple way up there, what is worse? You having to go through like 1 or 2 months of severe depression and thinking, okay, maybe I messed up, okay, maybe this really bad thing happened, and then eventually managing to work that out with the outward support of the other people in your life because they can actively see you going through this, versus you suffering in silence, you drinking your way through these issues because you don't want to confront them head on, right? I think insofar as we prevent you from just putting on a smile and living your life like nothing ever happened, that is an actively good thing. We give you 5 ideas. Number one, accessibility. You got to be taken seriously. Number two, discourse, and you are going to be able to have discussions about this more easily. Thirdly, the idea of stigma. Fourthly, the idea of how like people don't mistreat you because they understand there's something going on in your life. Fifthly, the idea that people don't misinterpret you either, right? Even if you're going through something rough, people will understand you're going through something rough and you're not going to like be misinterpreted in that way. Second, much more minor issue, the idea of security. They tell you that there's a violation of privacy. I don't think you should be so isolated within your life that you can't like no one will be able to see what's going on, right? I think you still like portray your emotions, etc., to a large degree when you like go out and you have like certain moods, etc., that are easily visible, right? I think this entire idea of exploitation was already largely dealt with. I think that therefore they don't really have any arguments here, right? These 3 ideas here really quickly, they're kind of symmetrical. Like people are more accepting of you, there's greater accessibility, and you're more humanized in the eyes of the average person. For all those reasons, so proud to oppose. Please, what's that about to say?
Okay, great, guys. Thank you so much for this debate.